You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast.
Hey, you know what? Maybe I'll get lucky. I'll get this early. I'll get sick. I'll get over it. And then I can be back in the workforce and ready to help my community when the hospital is completely overran. And, just conveying something like that, that gets twisted into you purposely want to get this so that you can give it to old ladies and let them die. You are a bioterrorist. And
Oh,
it's like,
God.
no, that's not what I said. If you're telling them they can't buy seeds because that puts them in danger of getting the virus, but they can go buy lottery tickets or they can go buy alcohol, that doesn't seem to make any scientific sense.
When an emergency room doctor is told he's a bioterrorist for expressing his thoughts on Facebook, it's time to push aside the Karens and the ignorance and let the doctor make his case. That's exactly what we're going to do with special guest Dr. Joshua Dopko on today's New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski. I'll be your host on this adventure. I first learned of Dr. Joshua Dopko when I read one of his posts on Facebook. It was in a COVID-19 group, and he'd been talking about how he'd gotten kicked out of a different COVID-19 group for being accused of being a bioterrorist and not being a real doctor, because no real doctor would say the things he was saying. Well, that intrigued me, so I contacted him, and yes, he is a real doctor, an emergency room doctor at that. And he's seen only one COVID case since this whole thing started. Dr. Dopko has some perspectives that are not going to align with what the legacy media narrative is. You're going to learn a lot in this interview. Before we get to his interview, I do need to tell you that our show's sponsor is the Lyft Realty Group in Northern Idaho. Ty Daniels is your guy up there. Northern Idaho is one of the most beautiful places in the country. If you were looking for a new home, if you want to get a vacation home, Ty is your guy. Give him a call, 208-640-6333. Ty Daniels with the Lyft Realty Group, 208-640-6333. Okay, so after several years of being in private practice, Dr. Dopko decided he really liked emergency medicine. He went into working strictly in emergency rooms. And he's been doing that now for the past 13 years. He's a really easygoing soul, a very pleasurable man to talk to. I think you're going to learn a lot if you listen to this whole interview. So at the end, I'll kind of wrap things up and let you know how we can get a hold of him. So without further ado, let's just go straight to my interview with Dr. Joshua Dopko. Well, I'm joined here today with Dr. Joshua Dopko, who I stumbled upon on Facebook, and he had some interesting things to say, and I tracked him down, and he's here on the show. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me to come along.
It is a pleasure. We had a short, brief conversation yesterday, which I very much enjoyed, and I enjoyed hearing some of what you had to say, and I said, we really need to talk about this so that more people can hear what you have to say. But before I get into that, let's just tell our audience who you are and where you come from and what prompted you to become a doctor.
Well, my name's Joshua Dopko. I was originally from Riverside, California, so Southern California. Moved when I was 15 to Arkansas, and I initially took a passion for music, and I went into college in Jonesboro as a music major. I was struggling with my music major. I took some biology classes that were core biology classes, and I did quite well in them. And so I decided to switch over to sciences and majored in zoology.
Oh, wow.
So I started hanging out with some other kids in college that were pre-med and talking with them, and I just decided to give it a try and got accepted to medical school in Little Rock, Arkansas, and went to medical school for 4 years there and did my residency in family practice in Texarkana, Arkansas. Our hospitals were in Texarkana, Texas. And then after residency, I moved out to to Arizona. I wanted to get closer to my family in California, but didn't want to get right back into California per se.
I kind of understand that. Sure.
So
All right. So you've been a doctor now for how long?
I graduated medical school in 2001 and graduated residency in 2004. And so I've been out on my own since 2004.
Okay. And so you had some family practice work, and then you've moved into as an working as an ER doctor. Is that correct?
Correct. I did I did a private practice for 3 years, and during that time I did some moonlighting in emergency departments, and I just really had a passion for emergency medicine, and so I gave up my practice, and since 2007 I've been doing full-time emergency department work. I've done some hospitalist work since that time, and I have covered some clinical shifts here and there since that time.
Okay. So you've got a pretty good background in medicine and understanding the needs of people, and you've seen a lot working as an ER doctor.
Correct. And most of my work has been done in small, underprivileged communities. I've worked on the border of Arizona and Mexico for 7 years. I've worked up in the northern part of the state, where we had a high population of Navajo that came to our ER. So that's really been my forte. Is I go to the smaller towns where there is no other coverage. It's typically just you, maybe a surgeon a couple days a week, but a lot of times not even that.
Okay. So what kind of flagged me here was I read a Facebook post that you had made about being kicked out of some COVID-19 groups because of some beliefs that you have that people found disagreeable.
Correct. I've been kicked out of multiple groups, and this last one that I then posted about was all I said is that I am an ER physician, that I work in 4 different hospitals, and that I've been working 240 hours a month since this COVID pandemic started, and I've seen 1 confirmed case of COVID, and I've seen 2 suspected cases of COVID. And just with that comment, within minutes, one of the moderators of the site was coming in, "You're not a physician. No physician would put this type of stuff on their Facebook feed." And she had screenshotted some posts I had about the gridlock, Michigan. And then she screenshotted a couple other things and just made the statement that no physician would have these kinds of opinions.
Wow.
And I went to respond, and when I went to respond, I found out I had been blocked from the group summarily just for saying I've only seen 1 documented COVID patient since this has occurred.
Unreal. Well, I also have another post here. I'm going to read a little bit. It says, I do not want anyone to think that I'm downplaying COVID-19 and putting the economy as more important than people who will die from this virus. I'm a realist. I have dealt with real hard life facts since I was small. The choice is not open economy and freedom of movement versus people getting the virus. The choice is open economy and freedom with half of us getting the virus versus closed economy and loss of freedom with half of us getting the virus.
Yes, yeah, that's one that I pinned shortly after that. And that's been kind of my philosophy on this ever since this began. When it was first in China and they were locking down the cities in China, everybody went through that phase of just joking and, oh, the coronavirus, and putting up the pictures of the Corona beer, and everybody making light of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear about the cases that pop up in Iran and Italy, and all of a sudden that kind of perked my attention as well as everybody else's. How did this get to Iran? How did this get to Italy? And then we start seeing how rapidly it starts decimating Italy. And so I just started looking at numbers, and I started telling my wife and telling friends, wow, this is going to come over here. It's going to just ravage through our population. If we assume that 50% of us get this, you're looking at 165 million people minimum getting this virus. And at that point, they were saying death rate was anywhere from 2% up to 4.5%. And I was just thinking to myself, oh my, if we're lucky, we're going to have 2 million dead in this country over the course of the next probably 6-8 months. And that was, and then as we started hearing more, I'm thinking, okay, maybe we can dodge a bullet here and only get 500,000 dead as some of the numbers started to go down. So as this was first starting to show up in the United States, that's the thinking in my mind, is that we're going to see, if we're lucky, 500,000 people dead. If we're not lucky, we're going to look at 2 million dead just in the United States. And when you're faced with those kind of numbers, it makes sense that we need to isolate, we need to try to slow the progression of this disease down as fast as we can. Now it's becoming, trying to extinguish this virus. When we first went into this lockdown, the whole point of this was to flatten the curve. It wasn't to change the area under the curve. The mentality is you're going to have the same amount of people infected. However, you're going to spread out the time of it. There was no talk about we are going to stop this virus. We're going to keep the hospitals from getting overwhelmed. I kept on expecting my hospital to get overwhelmed. I kept on expecting to see sick people come in. And what has happened is the ER where I'm currently working, there's typically 40 people in a 24-hour period that come through that ER.
Say that again. How many people?
There's typically 40 in a 24-hour period that come through the emergency department.
Okay.
Since we went into the COVID lockdown, since this pandemic has developed, our census has gone down to sometimes 7 patients in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
I will sit in an emergency department that is typically busy. Not so busy that it's overwhelming, but so busy that if you take time to go eat real quick, you have fallen behind.
Wow.
And now I'm sitting here in this emergency department for hours, literally hours, reading about COVID-19, reading about what's happening in other places, talking to the nurses.
So you have this, basically it's like an 80% reduction in number of people coming in. To what do you attribute that?
I think a huge portion of that is just fear to come to the hospital, because that's where everybody thinks the COVID virus is going to be. However, in my particular ER, we've seen 1 confirmed case of COVID come through that emergency department.
And this could be a situation, as we were talking about yesterday, that the cure can be worse than the disease, because you were talking about heart patients.
Correct. If in a typical day, and I've worked all over the place, and you'll typically in the ER, chest pain is a real common thing to come in. Sometimes it's anxiety related, sometimes it could be gallbladder, sometimes it's pneumonia, but sometimes this chest pain that comes in your door is a real cardiac event. It's somebody who needs to go up, get a stress test, get a cardiac catheterization, get some type of intervention. And I'd say if you see 4 or 5 patients a day with chest pain, probably 1, 2, maybe even 3 of those will have legitimate risks for cardiac disease.
Okay.
And some of them are having a heart attack as they come in. However, in the last month to month and a half, I've probably seen 5 people total that have come into the emergency department with chest pain.
So that means
So
we have all these people sitting home that have chest pains, that are afraid to come into the ER, and they may be actually having a heart attack or similar. And what does that happen to them down the line then? How does that impact them?
correct. So either people are not having chest pain because they're sitting at home, which I find hard to believe, or they are doing just what you say. They're sitting at home and just writing this out. And when you look at heart attacks, 50% of heart attacks die before they get to the hospital. Those are the huge ones. We can't do anything about those. Once you get to the hospital, your chances of surviving a heart attack are pretty decent. And we can actually go in and open up the arteries. You can give thrombolytics so that you can open blood flow back up to the heart, so you can reperfuse the heart. So some heart attacks are what we call subendothelial, which means they're the small arteries that get blocked. And those heart attacks, they're not going to kill you, but they're going to cause part of your heart to die. They're going to have that heart muscle replaced with scar tissue. And over time, that makes your heart weaker. That can lead to CHF, or congestive heart failure. That can significantly impact the quality of your life from this point on.
So we're creating a problem down the road for people to have bad hearts because they're not coming into the ER, is what you're saying.
That's correct. I fear that's the case. People who have diabetic emergencies and don't come in, people who have ulcers to their foot. I saw a gentleman not too long ago who allowed an ulcer on his great toe to go and fester for several days because he didn't want to come into the emergency department.
Wow. So people who read my column at Uncover DC are going to know that I've been a strong vocal opponent of all the fear mongering that we're seeing. And you're providing me with some actual facts as to the result of that fear mongering. So we have this curve, and I'm reading an article, by the way, it just came out on Uncover DC. People can go to uncoverdc.com and read this article by, it's called The Path to Ending Coronavirus Lockdowns. And there is a great explanation there about the curve and how we needed to flatten it and the healthcare's capacity and all that. But as you said earlier, we're not about erasing the curve. We're only flattening it.
Correct. Because, some of my viewpoints on this virus have not changed. I still feel that this virus is highly contagious. That has not changed at all. I am not somebody who believes that the virus isn't there. I'm not somebody who believes that the virus is not killing people. I don't believe that they're overly inflating numbers of death. I'm sure when we go back and look at it, there's going to be some deaths that are looked at and seen where basically COVID virus was just what pushed them over the edge, if you say. But so I don't think that these numbers are being inflated. But what I do think that we haven't really addressed here is that there's probably a huge percentage of people who have already had COVID virus that we're not even counting in this. And if you look at the study out of Santa Clarita, and there's one out of Los Angeles, where it's looking like 3 to 4% of the people that they randomly sampled had already had coronavirus. And so in the Santa Clarita, you're looking at 85,000 people, if you extrapolate it throughout the community, that have had coronavirus. If you look at Los Angeles County, you're looking at 400,000 people who have already had the virus. And when you look at those studies, if their data is correct, what it's showing is that this virus is having a 1 in 1,000 death rate, not the 3%, not the 10% that they were predicting over in Italy. And I think that makes a huge difference. Those deaths are still deaths, but if you need to get to herd immunity for this to stop, that 165 million Americans that will need to ultimately get this for it to end is going to be a death rate of about 165,000 people.
You mentioned herd immunity. We hear that term tossed around, and unless one is studied in that, they don't really understand what it means. Could you explain for our listeners what herd immunity is and how it relates to this virus?
All right. So at the beginning of this, nobody had ever seen this virus. Our immune system was completely naive to it. So that means that if you're exposed to the virus, you will get it and you will get infected with it. And you will be highly contagious, and whoever contacts you will get that virus and will become infected with it. And that just spreads from person to person to person. Now, once you get enough people infected, now, let's say you've already got it and you got over it, and now you come in contact with somebody else who is currently infected with COVID-19, you're exposed to them, the virus enters your nasal passage, enters your mouth, your immune system's able to neutralize that virus to kill it. Now you come over and you meet me, and if I've never had that virus, you cannot pass it to me because you are not infected with it. And so you essentially provide a roadblock. You provide almost like a firewall to that virus for me. And so that's the concept of herd immunity. And the more people who have been infected, the stronger that herd immunity is going to be.
So it kind of creates obstacles for the virus so it can't go anywhere else.
Correct.
Well,
So,
this is kind of an issue for me and a lot of the people that I'm talking with, because they say that we're hearing, as you said, and I think, and you alluded to this, we're not counting the people who may already have been exposed.
correct.
When we do that, we have this much lower death rates. And we had here in Idaho, a couple of things I want to talk about with you on this. There was a chief medical officer from probably our state's largest healthcare system came out and said it's 50 times, the death rate is 50 times worse than the flu. And I read that and I really had some questions about that, because I go, well, are they counting the people who've already been exposed, or are they just counting it against the cases that they have? And if they're leaving out the people who've already developed antibodies, then those numbers are way off. Would I be correct in that assumption?
You would be correct, because you don't know the total cases. What we're doing when we document and confirm COVID cases is you're already looking at the people who came to the hospital for medical care. You're already looking at people who needed to be hospitalized. So we are comparing the case fatality rate to the number of COVID patients that are already the most severe. So the ones who are already having the most advanced disease, those are the ones that we are counting as the total. And then we're looking at the death rate from that. So of course, those people, once you're sick enough to be in the hospital, once you're sick enough to need to be in an ICU, your death rate is going to be a lot higher.
So we heard a lot also about the hydroxychloroquine. So we've got several doctors who have talked a lot about that and kind of swear by it. We even had a Democratic congresswoman in Detroit who was basically on her deathbed with this. And she wasn't even told about hydroxychloroquine by her doctors. She had heard President Trump talking about it, and she asked her doctor about it, and he agreed to give it to her. And the next day she was fine. A week later, she's in the White House talking to President Trump and thanking him for bringing it up. What have you heard about hydroxychloroquine?
Well, I have physician friends who are taking it prophylactically. I have some physician friends that really swear by it. I think it's interesting when you look at death rates in India. They're having exceedingly low death rates from what you would anticipate with their population and their population density. And there's a large number of people in that country on Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine for malaria. So I think there's some promise to it. I personally am taking part in a trial for healthcare workers where I have a 66% chance that I'm actually taking hydroxychloroquine. I might be taking just a vitamin supplement.
So you are participating in one of these double-blind placebo studies?
Exactly. Yes, I signed up for that last week, and they got me my medication here. So I don't know which one I'm in, if I'm placebo or hydroxychloroquine. But
Well,
I consider it safe enough to where I'm not hesitant to put it into my body.
yeah, I was my jaw dropped when I saw some study that came out against hydroxychloroquine, and they told how much they were giving, and it was like 5 times the recommended dose. How can you
Yeah,
even call that a study?
yeah, water and 5 times its recommended dose can be dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was one of my friends used to say you can die from licking too many postage stamps. So, uh, well, let's talk a little bit about life of virus, because here in Idaho yesterday we had a mom about 4 miles from where I live. She was arrested, and I watched the video. And in fact, it was streamed live, and I think I caught it right on the replay right after it was happening. And the director of parks for the town was saying to all the moms there, the virus can live on plastic for 3 days. So we don't want kids playing on this plastic playground equipment. What do you have to say to this? Because I look at this and go, outside in the sun, what's up with that?
Yeah, so sunlight, it's looking like this virus is sensitive to sunlight. So sunlight with UV radiation, it kills a lot of things, kills viruses, kills bacteria. Playground equipment that's baking out in the sun I don't know if you've slid down a slide after it's been baking in the sun for a while. It gets pretty warm, and heat kills this virus. Yeah, is it possible that somebody with COVID-19 could have coughed on that slide immediately before the child goes down it? Yeah, I guess that's possible. But number one, you're outside, which just air and the wind, it's going to disperse the viral particles. And you have to think about viral load. If you get one virus, there's cells like macrophages and other cells in your body that just go around and sweep up things. You don't have to be immune to them. They can take care of little. So you get that one coronavirus that lands in your nose, your body might be able just to clear that. You shed it in your mucus, it doesn't infect you. So you're outside, you're dispersing the virus, you're in the sun, which the sunlight can kill the virus. If it's hot, heat kills the virus. And I think being outside is one of the best places that you can be. And it seems like it'd be safer to have your child out at a park playing in the sun than it would be cooped up in an apartment complex.
So we have these state health and welfare directors who are telling their governors we need to lock people down. It sounds like you're disagreeing with that recommendation.
Oh, I do. I think we need to be outside. We need to be encouraging activity. If you look at being locked up, depression can weaken your immune system. We know for a fact that depression can increase your chances of having a heart attack. It can impair your ability to take care of your diabetes. Exercise improves your immune system. It improves all these other things. You're less likely to get cancer when you exercise. So we want to take people and lock them into a house, keep them out of the sun. Sunlight helps with depression. It helps with immunity. People aren't working, and now we want to keep them sitting in their house. And you see all these memes all over Facebook about, wine consumption and alcohol. And, part of that people are joking, but part of it isn't. If you don't have to go to work and you woke up at 10 o'clock and you can't go outside, you can't do anything, and you enjoy drinking alcohol, what's your motivation to not do so?
Yeah.
You have, you can take, if you can't take your kids to the park, what are you going to do? So there's other ramifications to this that we need to think of other than just the virus.
So what you're saying is not just to these health and welfare directors, but to the moms out there and the dads who are taking care of their kids at home, who are furloughed from school because so many schools are shut down. You're saying, go out and play. And
yeah,
we have police officers arresting dads for being in the park with their daughter. I mean, we've seen that news report. This just seems kind of backwards.
right. Being out, I can't think of anything that would have more natural antiviral properties than being out in the ocean, swimming in the ocean with the salt water. The salt would be a desiccant to the virus. The water, you're cleansing yourself. When you get hit by a wave, there's no better ninny pot on the world than a wave up your nose, and we want to take that away from people. You're out in the sun. It seems kind of counterproductive. I just drove from Colorado to Arizona, and I like to sleep outside, and I like to camp on my way home. New Mexico had all of their campgrounds shut. I tried to find Forest Service roads, and many of the Forest Service roads had those orange barriers that they can fill up with water across them to keep you from going off into the woods. And I'm out in remote northern New Mexico where you can drive for 30, 40 miles without even seeing another car. Yet they're purposely shutting down campgrounds. I was finally able to find a place to sleep, but it was an old abandoned campground that was no longer used. It was already, picnic tables were broken, the concrete slabs were decayed, and that's where I was able to find to camp. And I thought, how ironic is this? They're keeping me from sleeping out alone in the woods. And my only other option would be to come from a hospital in Colorado, come to a town that I don't live in, make contact with the person in the hotel, and actually stay in a hotel room with shared ventilation with other guests. But I need to do that for social distancing because it's not okay to go sleep out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, it's backwards. It's backwards. So really, I think what you're saying here, in my terms, is we have governors acting in fear, and they're way overextending their reach. And maybe we'll spare the conversation here about my perspective on their overstepping their constitutional mandates, but they're really doing us a disservice and may end up causing more problems for us down the road. That's what I'm hearing you say.
I think so. And if your decisions aren't made based on science, people aren't going to believe what you have to say, even if some of what you're telling them is concise, is true. If you're telling them they can't buy seeds because that puts them in danger of getting the virus, but they can go buy lottery tickets or they can go buy alcohol, that doesn't seem to make any scientific sense. And with the economy as it is, if we stay shut down, we're going to have food insecurity. People won't be able to buy food. They won't afford it. Also, we're going to see somewhat of a breakdown in our food supply. Yet in Michigan, now's the time you would need to get your seeds started. If you wait 3-4 months, you're going to miss your growing season.
Right.
And if we are in a position to where farmers have just plowed under all their vegetables, and they don't have enough money to buy seed to plant the next year's crops, because who knows what kind of transportation they're going to have. Now might be the time where these people do need their garden. I think that the side that wants to stay closed is looking at this as, oh, I've been accused of, oh, so you want the survival of the fittest. You don't care if people die. I've been accused of being a bioterrorist because I have conveyed the thought myself that at this point I have accepted the fact I'm going to get coronavirus. When you look at China, when you look at Italy, you look at what they were wearing, what PPEs they had. They had the full body suits, the full masks. They were completely covered. They had spotters watching them to make sure that everything was covered and that they were putting on their equipment and taking off their equipment precisely. I'm lucky if I get an N95 mask. And so if this virus is as contagious as they say, and I was looking at places in Italy and China where doctors were dressed like that and they were still getting it, I came to the realization early on in this, I am going to get this. Period. The only way I'm not going to get this is if I decide to abandon my post, lock myself in my house, and never leave my house until this is over. That's not who I am. I'm not going to be the one that runs away from danger. I'm going to go to work. And I told my wife, I'm going to get this. You're going to get it. Zach is going to get this. And it took her a while to accept that. But now we all have acceptance of this. When I voice that I have acceptance that I'm going to get coronavirus, and that my philosophy on it is I'd rather get it sooner than later. I'd rather get it before this peak that doesn't really seem to be transpiring. And I was expecting my hospital to be overrun before the peak. And my philosophy was, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll get lucky. I'll get this early. I'll get sick. I'll get over it. And then I can be back in the workforce and ready to help my community when the hospital is completely overran. And, just conveying something like that, that gets twisted into, you purposely want to get this so that you can give it to old ladies and let them die. You are a bioterrorist. And it's like, no, that's not what I said. What I said is I've come to the acceptance I'm going to get it. And ironically,
but here is, sorry for interrupting, but there and right there lies the ignorance of the herd immunity issue, because they think that once you've got it, that you're always going to be a carrier of it and you're always going to be contagious. They don't realize that once you've developed an immunity, you can't pass it on.
Right. I can go in and I don't have to worry about donning PPEs. I can save those for somebody else. I can just go in and see a person who is sick and see them like a human being. I don't have to hide my face from them. I don't have to cover my body completely up. If we're at a
Did you, and I know you said earlier that you believe the death count, but did you know that New York in the single day added 4,000 to their count because they suspected the person had COVID?
I wasn't aware of that, but it doesn't surprise me.
They hadn't even counted. And this kind of goes back to something else that maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't, but we have a doctor who's actually a state representative in one of the northern M states. I think it's Montana. It could be Minnesota. I think it's Montana. But he said that if you're a Medicaid patient and you are diagnosed with COVID-19 and you are admitted to the hospital automatically receives $13,000 flat fee to cover all expenses. If that Medicaid patient, has to go on a ventilator, the hospital gets $39,000 just for putting the person on a ventilator. Even if it's only for 2 minutes, they get $39,000. And I looked at that and go, gee, well, that's a pretty interesting way for New York to help its hospital budget crisis. But that was, by the way, something else that you talked about yesterday briefly, was some of these small hospitals, the margins are real thin. They've got a real drop in their population and the census count of people coming in, and these hospitals might close.
Right. So as we're going through this pandemic, we could have all these rural hospitals in economic trouble. They could close. And so that could open up all kinds of issues. Um, and so further down the line, that's going to increase your morbidity and mortality from everything we talked about: heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. You're going to have decreased access to healthcare, which everybody preaches that that's a bad thing, you know.
Hmm.
And now we're going to do that to some of the most vulnerable populations. And I guess we just have to go to the city. But when the city's 2 hours away, 3 hours away, that can make the difference between life or death.
Rather than shut down the states, I would have much preferred to have seen governors getting on TV every night, just like the president's doing, and saying, okay, here's the situation in our state. Please don't travel in this section. Please avoid this section. This is a hot spot. Here in Idaho, we've got basically 2.5 hot spots. But the rest of the state is so huge and so remote, and there's some of these counties have one case of infection. So we've shut down an entire economy in a lot of these states that didn't need to be shut down. It just seems like a one-size-fits-all answer here has really caused us more problems.
Right. It sounds like we should have shut down some of the urban areas and let some of the other areas open. One of my concerns is if you have a death rate in New York right now of 10,000 people, if we're looking at these numbers from Santa Clarita and Los Angeles, it shows that it's a 1 in 1,000 mortality rate, then you're looking at 100,000 New Yorkers who have you're looking at 1 million New Yorkers who have already had coronavirus and can provide some herd immunity to the rest of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a whole group of us that are not willing to just hide.
Mm-hmm.
And you are either going to accept the fact that we are going to go about our lives, or B, you're going to force us to not go out and take part in our own lives.
I'm gonna go back to the quote that we opened with, and that is, the choice is not open economy and freedom of movement versus people getting the virus. The choice is open economy and freedom with half of us getting the virus versus closed economy and loss of freedom with half of us getting the virus.
Correct. And that's how I feel about this.
I think it's something that we really need to try to educate people on. That people have been feared mongered into thinking that, oh, he's got the virus. And the media is putting the microscope on every case, which doesn't happen during the regular flu season. And we have currently more flu deaths than CV deaths in this country. But we don't have a shutdown for that. We can discuss that later. But the point is, you're going to get the virus. You're going to be exposed to it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You can't.
And then you take the other thing that I want to just try to help people as far as education goes is when you look at the deaths, and we're not seeing enough reports, by the way, on the deaths. We're just hearing death. We're not hearing the fact that these people were 80 years old with asthma and heart problem, maybe COPD or something like that.
Correct.
You know, we don't know what the comorbidity factors are. They're not reporting that. They're just saying death. And even in Italy, I remember hearing this stat was 97, 98% of the deaths, age was average 80.
Right. But
with 2 comorbidity factors.
They don't say a lot about the deaths, but I guarantee you, if I did become that 1 in 1,000 that died from this, I guarantee you that most news media outlets would be focusing on my death ad nauseum, is especially now that I've been on with you and with some of the things I've said on Facebook and the fact that I've participated in the gridlock Denver. Yeah, so I guarantee you they would really highlight my death. We're also missing the fact of, that what we have done, we are going to increase, elective surgeries don't mean they're not surgeries that are not necessary. So if you have a cancer, for instance, that it's not causing an obstruction to your intestine that would make it emergent, that's still elective. But there's a cancer that you would like cut out of your body, and you'd like to start your chemo, you'd like to start your radiation, you'd like to do whatever treatment needs to be done to better your chances of survival. That stuff's being put on the back burner. I have a cousin who tore his rotator cuff. He's 49. Um, Ultimately, if you don't fix you have some time to fix them, but if you don't fix them before the muscle atrophies and turns to fat, you can't fix it. And so he's waiting with a bum shoulder. He needs a shoulder surgery so he can go back to work when they allow him to go back to work. My son he's special needs. He is not very vocal. He needs intensive speech therapy. He needs extensive cognitive therapy. If he's going to even one day function at the level to where he can live in a group home, he needs intensive therapy. And now he's at the house going crazy and not understanding why he can't see his friends, why he can't see his teachers. And so there's other things other than the virus that we are completely ignoring, and they're going to haunt us for a long time.
The laws of unintended consequences. You talked about the food shortage. Here in Idaho, they're dumping milk like crazy. People are selling they're being told to buy the dairy board. Go ahead and sell your dairy cows for meat because nobody's buying the milk. So that's going to create a milk shortage down the road, and a cheese shortage, because cheese takes a long time to process. So we're going to have cheese shortages in the next year or so. It's crazy.
It is. But, on an up note, I think this is a very amazing time to be alive too. It is a scary time, but I think that this is really showing people, opening their eyes to just how fast I've said numerous times to people, society can collapse in days. It doesn't take months. And we're seeing that society can collapse in days. I think this will really emphasize to people that you need to be able to be self-reliant. Maybe you shouldn't trust the government with everything. This is a great, great exercise in why our founding fathers gave us the Second Amendment. We may need to look at local supply chains. Why am I buying, nothing against Idaho, but why am I buying Idaho milk? There's plenty of milk here in Arizona that I could be buying.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be looking at maybe how we supply chains. And so I think there's opportunity here for us to learn and expand and really take to heart things that we have taken for granted for so long.
You're echoing something my wife said. Freedom has been too cheap lately.
Yeah, and this is something that has really concerned me. And there's that saying, put your money where your mouth is. I'm willing to put my life where my mouth is. I went out and participated in the gridlock in Denver. I wasn't wearing PPEs. I'm not wearing masks. Nobody else really there was. A few people were wearing masks, but most of the people were not. And I thought, this is really, if this doesn't demonstrate to the people in power, nothing short of drastic is going to show them. These people came in because they were afraid of losing their house. They were afraid of losing their businesses that they have worked their whole life to build. They were more afraid of the loss of freedom than of this virus that everybody is telling us 24/7 is going to kill us. It's going to kill you. You will die from this. Yet people are willing to come to Denver, that is a known hotspot, and stand on the Capitol steps and protest what they're doing. I went with a friend of mine who he's a lifelong socialist. He's an avid protester. He's gone to women's marches. He's gone to the Democracy Now. He's gone to the Earth Day, the Wall Street one, the Occupy Wall Street. And out of all the protests he had gone to in his whole life, he said this was the largest protest he had ever seen. He also said that this was the best organized protest he had ever seen. And he said the people at the protest, it was the most peaceful and friendly protest he had ever been to.
Wow.
But these are the people who are also exercising their Second Amendment right. And if you come down and you clamp down on them harder as a result of them showing up peacefully, you've also got to be concerned about some social unrest that can come with this, and not to mention what kind of economic and life toll that could have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have a question for you. It's something about Kentucky. But let me preface it by asking a question. From your understanding, how long does it take for COVID symptoms to appear?
They say it can take up to 14 days, as early as 3, I guess.
Okay. And average?
I think that they're saying it's closer to the 2-week margin where you can be infective and you don't even realize you have it.
Okay. And the people that I've talked to that know somebody that has been infected with COVID, they say about a 10-day before the symptoms start appearing after they were exposed. And so 10 days. The reason, and then how long does it take to get test results back?
It depends where you are. I tested somebody and it took me 5 days to get the results back. Now I know they have some rapid tests. So,
Rapid
the
test is
one
how long?
as quick as 15 to 25 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So then the ones that you can do large volumes on, it's going to be at least 24, 48-hour turnaround.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is because this is just a media thing where they're trying to imply that people who go to protests are creating an increase in coronavirus spread, because in Kentucky on a Wednesday, they had a protest at the Capitol. And then on Sunday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days later, the governor comes out and says, we had this huge spike. We had the worst day ever of new cases. And so the headline on Monday was coronavirus spikes to new level after protest at Capitol. 4 days later. And I'm thinking, to show symptoms and get tested, it's kind of a paper tiger there.
Right. So they're quoting two totally unrelated facts together. It might be a fact that they hit their highest day, and it's a fact that there were protesters, but to combine those two 4 days later is not
What I call fear mongering.
That is.
That's fear mongering. Oh gosh. Dr. Joshua Dopko, I could probably talk with you for hours about this kind of stuff. And I very much appreciate you coming on the show. And
hey, it's my pleasure. If you ever want to chat again, I'll be happy to do so.
Awesome. Awesome. And again, keep on doing the good work that you're doing. And I appreciate you putting yourself out there and being on the front line of this. And thank you for sharing the observations that you have. And hopefully we've educated a few people on some things. If they have any questions, I don't want to put out your personal information, but if anybody has any questions for you, they can contact me directly and I can pass them on to you and you can decide what you want to do with them. How's that?
That'd be wonderful. I sure appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So I'll put the contact information in the show notes down below. And of course, if anybody wants to make any comments down below, we'll probably get a whole bunch of them. They're free to do that as well. So
sounds
anyway,
wonderful.
Dr. Dopko, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Joshua Dopko, and I hope you learned a few things along the way. As I said there at the end, if you have any messages for him, you want to send something along to him, you can send me the email. Just use newbookofdaniel@outlook.com, and I will make sure that that message gets forwarded to him. Of course, if you want to leave any comments down below, I encourage you to do that, as I do read all comments. And of course, if you like the show, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and also feel free to share it on social media. And of course, you can subscribe to be notified every time we upload a new show. Just click the red subscribe button, then click the bell, and click the word all. And then you're going to get notified every time we upload a new show, because I don't do that with regularity right now. Anyways, if you want to contact me, you can do that at Twitter, simply @newbookofdaniel. You can follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/newbookofdaniel. And if you want to read any of my columns on the issues of the day, you can go to uncoverdc.com. Uncoverdc.com. And then, of course, if you want to send me an email, just do that at newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. You have been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcasts. I thank you so much for listening. My name is Daniel Bobinski, and I will catch you on the next show.